Jishodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotarashata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotarashata Srimad His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantara Shimam Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishiguru and Shigoranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Summon Bonon, Chapter 63, Krishna fights Bana Asura, text number 41, but we're also going to read text number 40. 41 is in the board, so I'm going to read text number 40 by myself, and then we read together text number 41. Jammaya mohita dija putra dara grihadishu ummajanti nimajanti prashakta brijinarbhave. Translation: their intelligence bewildered by your Maya, fully attached to children, wife, home, and so on, persons immersed in the ocean of material misery sometimes rise to the surface and sometimes sink down. And the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that rising in the ocean of misery indicates elevation to higher species, such as demigods, and that being submerged refers to the degradation to lower species, even to the immobile forms of life, such as trees. As stated in the Vayu Purana, Viparjayas Chabhavati Brahmatva Stavarat Tayo Stavarat Vayoho. Quote, the living beings rotates between the position of Brahma and that of an unmoving creature. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Shiva, having glorified the Lord, now pursues his original intention of securing the Lord's grace for Banasura. Thus, in these and the following 4 verses, Lord Shiva instructs Bana on his actual position in relationship to the Lord. Shiva's appeal to the Lord for compassion towards Bana appears in text 45. So we read together text number 41. Deva datan imam latva Nilokan ajitendriya Jonadrije tatvat padau Sasocho hyatmavanchaka Devadattan iman laptva Nrilokan ajitendriya Jonadrije tatvat padau Sasocho hyatmavanchaka Devadattan iman laptva Nrilokan ajitendriya Jonadrije tatvat padau Sasocho hyatmavanchaka. Please chant. Deva, by the Supreme Lord, Dattam, given, Imam, this, Labdha, attaining, Nri, of human beings, Lokam, the world, Ajita, uncontrolled, Indriyaha, his senses, Jaha, who, Na adriyeta, will not honor, Twat, your, Padau, feet, Saha, he, Sochaha, pitiable, he, indeed, Atma, of himself, Banchakaha, a cheater. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who has obtained this human form of life as a gift from God, yet who fails to control his senses and honor your feet, is surely to be pitied, for he is only cheating himself. Purport. Lord Shiva here condemns those who refuse to engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitangena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vasavitale Shrimate Roma Paraswami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, Lord Shiva, feeling compassion for his follower, or his fallen follower, Bana Asura, seeing Banasura in the situation that it looks like he's just about to lose his life because of the offense that he have committed. Not only Guru Aparat, but also he have committed offenses towards the personality of Godhead. And the Lord has proceeded to cut 996 of 1,000 arms. And Lord Shiva, observing this situation, felt compassion for this fallen follower. And he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and to help and to save his follower, his disciple, Banasura. Lord Shiva was afraid that he was just about to be finished by the Lord. So Lord Shiva approaches the Lord and offers these beautiful prayers in glorification of the personality of Godhead. Standard prayers. But then now he proceeds in prayers of the Lord, though he is, for the following verses, from number 40 to number 45, it is explained, 5 verses that are particularly designed to give Banasura proper instructions, the instruction of his relationship with Krishna. Something that put him in that very precarious situation, very difficult situation. That so Lord Shiva is instructing Banasura about these two things, the consequences of these two different paths, the path of devotional service and the path of disregarding the personality of Godhead. In other words, the path of the Suras and the path of the Asuras. This is a distinction that in general is very important and is made in all the instructions that the Lord provides through his devotee or directly himself to help us have a proper picture of what we're dealing with. There is two paths, basically, that we have to choose. Krishna makes that distinction in the Bhagavad Gita when he explains about this divine nature and the demoniac nature. He takes two different chapters in the Bhagavad Gita to go through that in a very specific way. So those who follow this divine path, they call suras or devotees. And those who follow the path of ignorance of the personality of Godhead, they call asuras or non-devotees. Sometimes, we use the word demons, demoniac. So Lord Shiva is explaining also these two paths with the consequences that it has. The Sri Upanishad also explains about those consequences very clearly when it explains, this, that there is the path of those who follow the who follows the principles, who to embrace and accept the Ishavasya principle that is considered vidya or transcendental knowledge, in this case, knowledge. And those who follow avidya, which is a path of ignorance, and then the results that it have. And in general, the results of following the path of vidya is you elevate yourself. And if you follow the path of avidya or the asuras or the demoniac path, then you spiral down into a very, very miserable situations. So, same thing Lord Shiva is explaining here, and is directed to help Vanasura sort of realize, why he is in that situation, that he's just about to lose his life. Um, so, and at the same time, Lord Shiva is appealing to Lord Krishna to spare him. So, it's something quite wonderful in one sense, from the perspective, just aside, just an appreciation on the spiritual master. Because when your spiritual master gives you initiation and there is a sacrifice that is happening, the spiritual master, you make vows to the spiritual master, but the spiritual master also make a vow to Krishna, and that is to take the responsibility for this disciple to bring him back home, back to Godhead. So it becomes an eternal relationship. Sometimes Prabhupada was asked, what would happen if the disciple falls? Then Prabhupada explained the spiritual master will have the obligation to actually come back to pick up that disciple. So it's a huge responsibility. And we see here Lord Shiva, even though this fallen follower has completely derided him and committed these very serious offenses towards him, he still favors this fallen disciple and rescue him. And not only that, because of his desire to give mercy or to offer mercy to Banasura, then Krishna provides that mercy. We see the same during the pastime of Lord Nityananda, how he saves by his mercy Jagai and Madai. When the Lord was ready to kill Jagai, Lord Nityananda pleaded, and the Lord forgave. And not only that, because Lord Nityananda accepted them, then the Lord accepted Lord Chaitanya. So the spiritual master is very, very merciful, very merciful. And because the spiritual master desires to favor the conditions, so have that type of mercy, then the Lord oblige. Regardless, the Lord oblige. So the reason when we find ourselves as aspiring devotees, going to all these struggles, and sometimes we ask ourselves, how in the world I'm still, after many, many years and years of practicing Krishna consciousness, and I'm still struggling after many years. And most likely I'm still struggling with the same things that I've been struggling forever. Huh? How's I'm still, situated in Krishna consciousness? How is that the Lord have this, what appears to be an unlimited tolerance and patience towards our insidious, this, hold to these conditions that we may have? And the answer is because the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. Because my spiritual master is kindly disposed towards myself, then Krishna obliged the spiritual master. So so it is always the mercy of the Lord, is the mercy of the spiritual master that sustains our path in Krishna consciousness throughout. And if we individually look at, how of that relationship, we see how the spiritual master favor is there constantly. So we see that situation right here with Lord Shiva towards Banasura. So these are very important instructions, especially when we find ourselves uh, dealing with the upside downs of material condition. When the material energy cover us in some way. And so to have that picture, that very well described picture, and it's just a standard. Throughout the prayers, if you read, the most of the great prayers that are recorded in the Bhagavatam have these elements. The element of glorifying the position of Krishna, and the element of describing this contrasting path, the path of devotion and the path of materialistic, the materialistic way of life. Right here, we have text 41. Lord Shiva says that this human life is very rare and it's a very great gift. And if one fails to control the senses and worship the lotus feet of the Lord, so there is these two things. The controlling of the senses, and then the worshiping of the lotus feet, the accepting the lotus feet. And this is, just remind me, the lotus feet of the Lord are considered in the prayers, famous prayers, the prayers of the the prayers of the demigods towards Lord Krishna. Second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto. Krishna is within the womb of Devaki, and then the demigods comes headed by Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva to offer these prayers to Lord Krishna within the womb. And they offer these very famous prayers, one that Srila Prabhupada quotes many, many times. We remember one, Padam Padam Yadvi Padam, that this word is a place, it's a very dangerous place. So let me see here. Yeah, for those, the demigods, they explain that that the famous verse that those great sages, O lotus eye Lord, by concentrating one meditation on your lotus feet, which are the reservoir of all existence, And by accepting those lotus feet as the boat by which to cross the ocean of nations, one follows in the footsteps of Mahajans, the great sages, saints, and devotees. By this simple process, one can cross the ocean of nations as easily as one step over the hoof print of a calf. Go Vatsapadam Baba Adhim. So the Go Vatsapadam, the little hoof print, so the ocean shrinks into that little hoof print of a calf. And then they go to say, O Lord, who resemble the shining sun, you're always ready to fulfill the desires of your devotee, and therefore you are known as a desire tree, Panchakalpataru. When acharyas completely take shelter under your lotus feet in order to cross the fierce ocean of nations, they leave behind on the earth the method by which they cross. And because you are very merciful to your other devotees, you accept this method to help them. So, the process of surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord. This is the path of transcendental knowledge. This is the path of Vidya. The process of accepting and surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is considered this transcendental abode that allows one to easily go through the fierce ocean of material existing nations. So we hear this, we see this connection of the lotus feet of the Lord, the lotus feet of the Lord. You take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. How you take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord? Well, we also pray in so many ways to Vishnu Padaya, those saints, those Mahajans, those devotees who have taken shelter in the lotus feet of the Lord. So we pray to our spiritual master, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Vishnu Padaya. We praise Srila Prabhupada because he is situated in the lotus feet of the Lord. And therefore, by his desire, by the desire of Acharya, by the desire of the Guru, then we've been provided that method, that simple method of taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So you take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master who is situated in the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And then you're safe. Even if you fall apart or you fall down, you still will be safe. The scriptures describe this in so many ways that those who neglect the lotus feet of the Lord, they fall down badly into the lower species of life. We hear that in these two verses. In verse number 40, it describes that, the conditioned souls, sometimes they rise to the surface or sometimes they sink to the bottom. So there's this two paths. One is elevating, rising, the other one is sinking. And so those who neglect the lotus feet of the Lord, it's described, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, that those of demoniac nature, they're cast into the lower species of life. So they continually sink down into a life, a hellish life of misery. In the Sri Upanishad, they call the Atmaha, the killers of the soul. It's a path that is called the killers of the soul. So, for those who completely reject the lotus feet of the Lord, then the fall down is very severe. But those who have accepted the lotus feet of the Lord, even in the fall down, is a different type of fall down. Because Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that for the fallen yogi, then Suchinam, they take birth in a situation that will allow them to revive again their pursuit of Krishna consciousness. So they take birth in the family of pious brahmanas or in a situation that will have facilities. So it's a different thing. That's for the fallen devotee. So regardless, you take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. You always will be protected. And the demigods, they say something. This is a verse that Prabhupada quotes many, many, many times. That explains about, okay, so the devotees take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and they're being helped to cross the ocean of material nations. So what happened to other personalities, other living entities that are searching for a path of happiness, a path of perfection, a path of elevation, that are not accepting the lotus feet of the Lord? That they're disregarding the lotus feet of the Lord. Other path, what happened to them? Because in the Vedas, so many different paths are recommended, not for the goal of embracing the lotus feet of the Lord, but for other different goals, for the goal of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So for the goals of piety, for the goals of economic development, for the goals of sense gratification, or even for the goal of liberation. What happened to all of those that are pursuing these goals, but they haven't accepted the lotus feet of the Lord? The translation of this famous verse have that preamble. Someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees, but who have accepted different process for obtaining salvation. What happened to them? So in answer to this question, Lord Brahma and the other demigods said, Yeniera Vindaksha Vimukta Maninas Twayi Ashta Bhava Avishuddha Buddhaya Aruhyo Krichena, what is it? Aruhyo Krichena Parampadam Pada Parampadam Tata Patanti Adho Nadrita Jushman Angrajaha. So the translation goes like this. O Lotus Eye Lord, Aravindaksha, Jenya Aravindaksha. O Lotus Eye Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So regardless, the destined for any type of path in the lotus feet of the Lord is falling down into the material pool, into the material ocean of nations, regardless. And that's different, even paths that are explained in the scriptures. And there's something very interesting about this verse because the words that it used, the native English, bimut, the words bimukta maninas, which indicates bimukta means liberated. So bim actually no, mukta means liberation. Bimukta means that you're falsely considering that you're free. It's only happening in your mind, bimukta maninas. So meaning that there is some sort of delusion that is there. Huh? If it's happening, if I'm believing something is happening and it's just in my mind and it's not really factually happening, I'm imagining that it's happening. That means it's a delusion. So in my mind, I may consider myself highly elevated and even liberated. But it's not factual, it's just in my mind. And the other thing, so there's an implication of a delusion. And then the other thing that is why that's happening, because that's something that is quite bewildering. Because you become, sometimes you're exposed to people, personalities that are highly qualified, intellectually very powerful. So how is that people with such a great intellect are capable of finding themselves in this delusion, in this Bimukta Maninas program? How? How is it possible that you have these situations that, really qualified people are not able to see something as self-evident as, the Lord's supremacy? And is explained by the next Twaji Ashtababa, this word Abhishuddha Buddhaya, because the intelligence is impure. The intelligence is bewildered, is impure. So when an impure intelligence, then Vimukta Maninas happen. In these verses also, today, is similar thing is explained that why these type of people are to be pitied because they only cheating themselves. They call Atma Vanchaka. Atma Vanchaka means that you cheating yourself. You cheating yourself. And because you want to be cheat yourself, then you find that Krishna makes arrangements for all kinds of cheaters to come to you. We recently experienced, um, my wife and I were for 5 days involved in the Parliament of the World Religions. Huge operation. a gigantic warehouse place, the place in McCormick Center. It's gigantic. It's like a stadium. And they basically convert this huge space into a little village of different booths, 10 by 10, you know, of all the major religions, along with all kinds of different groups that have all these different propositions of how to elevate yourself, how to achieve, enlightenment, all these different things. And here we are in a huge space that, I mean, you can fit thousands of people. Krishna consciousness, our presentation is a 10 by 10 square. So it's a small. Uh, it's one of the smallest squares among many, many squares. And the fact is that most of these proposals are, many of them are extremely confused, really, really like out there confused. And there's so many different things that are being presented in the name of a path of knowledge that is bizarre. Just across us, there was really nice people following one of these personalities that are claiming themselves to be an avatar and propose a path that was, I mean, it's even difficult to discuss about it because the way of learning how to be able to understand these differences of a life. So then, okay, let's experience the most extreme hedonistic, what is the word? Hedonistic actions, the most extreme ones. Let's do it to be able to understand the difference between a path of gross sense gratification and the path of devotion. So we are going to now, I'm the guru, I'm the avatar that is going to liberate you, and I'm going to lead you to do all these different, really degraded activities that, very degraded activities. And then, so you experience the miseries that that's going to cause. And then, then you may be open to understand that you worship me and then you'll be free. Something like that. And really, really good people, nice people, are being cheated and are being following the things. And there's over and over and over all kinds of colorful personalities with all kinds of different uh, outfits and paraphernalia and things like that, with so many proposals. But none of them are fully taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So, and they fully believe. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you see that they're believers. There's faith. There's faith. And they're embracing this path and embracing these groups and then worshiping these people and accepting their leadership. And the fact is that they've been cheated. They've been cheated because, in one sense, you are cheating yourself. And it becomes so important, the mission of Krishna consciousness, to bring this knowledge, to the world, such an important thing, such an important mission, because the fact is that most people are innocent. And the Sri Upanishad makes that, I finish with this. The Sri Upanishad talks about that that it explains the situation for those who are following the path of avidya, of ignorance, and how um, you descend into these dark regions of the material consciousness. Those are mostly innocent people that are just covered by ignorance. But the worst of all, it is explained worse in the Sri Upanishad, the worst are those who post themselves to be teaching the path of Vidya, but they actually not giving the principles of Vidya, which is the Ishavasya principle. You understand Krishna's position and you take shelter of his lotus feet. So those who post themselves as teachers of knowledge, but they're actually teaching avidya, they're the worst. They're worse. Is considered. This is not just us being a, judgmental thing. These are the words of the scriptures. And this is important things to understand. That's why in the instructions of all the different great personalities, and in this case, Lord Shiva is doing that, is always giving us that contrast, that differences. You know, they explain, you make this choice, vidya or avidya. You choose avidya, this is the result. So they clearly explains that. It's important because Prabhupada says, if you are looking in the market to buy a diamond, you better understand what a diamond is. Because otherwise, someone is going to sell you a piece of glass. So we have to have a proper understanding of what is the path of transcendence. What is the purpose of knowledge? Vedaisha, what is it? Vedaisha aham eva vedio ved. Vedaisha sarvar aham eva vedio. That Krishna says that the purpose of the Vedas is to know him, to be able to take full shelter of his lotus feet. The purpose of knowledge is just that. So, so it's important that we have this understanding. And this is how Vanasura is, now that his pride is being destroyed by Krishna, now he's ready to receive the instructions for Lord Shiva and learn his lesson. And he will receive, by the grace of Lord Shiva, the mercy of Lord Krishna. In the same way that by the grace of Lord Nityananda, Jagai and Madai became great, great devotees. Any comments or questions?
Hare Krishna. Oh.
Yo.
Hare Krishna. Um, Prabhu, I was thinking sometimes when I'm preaching and I'm selling the books, I tell people, you know, you can reach Krishna even in your own religion. So I mean, I didn't heard something on that order before. So it's all lost, where all the religions and people practicing their religions, and it's all lost when it comes to them reaching Krishna and serving his lotus feet.
No. Um, for those who have embraced the personality of Godhead, so you have major religions that are um, that they have embraced, the supreme personality. Their knowledge is not may not be profound, but they have, or their motivations may be different. Krishna says that Chatur Vidha Bhajante Man Namo tu Sukritina Arjuna, that they're considered Sukritina, they're considered pious, even if their motivation is for making their material life better or satisfying their inquisitive nature, or even by searching for liberation from this material world. Even if they have those motivations, they're considered they're considered devotees, and Krishna favors them. Now, because if you don't come to fully accept that the only goal is to fully embrace and surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, and you worship the lotus feet of the Lord with that single type of motivation, then we can fall down. Now, like I say, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that the fall down of those who are devotees is different than those who are completely opposed to the personality of Godhead. So, say, during this Parliament of the World Religion, there were some major religions there. One that uh, was pretty much, um, it was like highlighted there by their work, was the Sikh community. Turbans, big beards, like that. And it's a community that here in the US has been persecuted because of being confused with the Muslim community, who also are highly persecuted because, the extreme jihadist Muslims that are doing a lot of terrorist acts, and they were the cause of the 9/11, catastrophe. So, terrorist attack. So, the Sikh community, they have this, one of the main um, focus is service to society as their duty towards God. And so they're famous for doing this activity that is called langar. Langar means is prashan distribution, is food distribution. So they have these large pandals in different places in India and different places in the world where they are, that they offer this service. They give free food to the people. So they did this langar in the festival of the world religion, in the Parliament of the World Religions. Throughout the 5 days, they feed everybody. And then you have the full community just with grace, with generosity, with happiness, serving people. And you feel, and they do it, and their whole motivation is that, yes, this is the mercy of God. This is the work of it's glorifying God. And it was very touching. It was, you felt, that it was something very wonderfully done. Everybody appreciated it. They fed everybody. So this type of work is an elevating type of work. It's, what Lord Shiva is saying, that, you elevate yourself. It's described in the Vedas. Your duties towards society. When you perform your duties, dharmas, then you elevate yourself. You elevate yourself to better situations. You also, by piety, you elevate yourself. You elevate your consciousness. But in the Bhagavatam, this is described as Kaitava Dharma. It's dharmas that are motivated, that have some mix, that are not perfectly pure. And it's not to say that that is not present in all these great religions, because in all these great religions you have great saints, from Christianity to Islam, to all these great religions. They have perfected beings that have come to teach. So, and the teachings are there in the scriptures. They reveal scriptures. So all these scriptures have the capacity to give you, to put you right, in the path of perfection. And they have saints that are showing that. But the focus is different. So therefore, that's what the whole thing of Srila Vyasadeva feeling despondent. And then Narada Muni coming and telling, the reason you're despondent because you have given all this, process of religion that are not focused on the lotus feet of the Lord. So you have to give a scripture that is exclusively about the lotus feet of the Lord and nothing else. That anything that has a mixed motivation, you kicked out. So Kaitava Dharma gets atraya, gets atra, gets kicked out. And this is exclusively about Param Dharma. And that's the great fortune that we have. That although we have absolutely no qualification, we are on the same, we can very easily have gone in any of these thousands of different proposals that are out there. And if we're lucky, we'll be, performing some pious activities, for serving society, family, this and that. But that's, we know that you're destined to again fall into the material pool, regardless. That's what the scripture said. So it's quite something. Is that any other comment or questions? Yeah, Murari Prabhu.
Yes, I have a comment. Ooh,
You're hearing yourself.
I was just thinking about this um, lecture today. Brought back some memories in my past, and about these major religions. Uh, I'm speaking of one of the Christian religions, and I was a very I was very close to this religion, and I believed it. You know, I believed in it hook, line, and sinker. And because it's, how shall I say, its focus was on the lotus feet of Lord Jesus Christ. And I was very close to my pastor. And in our youth group, I came to know two young men. One was, his name was Vishnu, and the other one was Ramu. And they were very much interested in just hanging out with our youth group just to know whatever they could, uh, about the Christian religion. And I had association with these two young gentlemen, and I always thought they were the nicest guys I've ever met, very Christian like. And so I asked my pastor one day, I said, will Vishnu and Ramu go to heaven? And his reaction literally stung me. With a very strong voice and stern voice, he turned to me and he said, well, they better not be. And I'm in shock. And I was in shock so much that I stopped going to my church for a while. And I got a phone call that they say, are you coming back, to the church, join the group? And I said, I haven't decided yet. So a couple of days later, in the church newspaper, I found out that I was excommunicated. And I and that's a very serious thing. Being excommunicated is you lose your contact with Christ, you're cut off, and you're cast into the outer darkness, so to speak. And I was really devastated by that. And I said, but do they have the power to do that to me? They don't even know me that well. And I started doing some serious reflection, and I decided, no, they don't have that right. I don't know why they think they have that right to excommunicate me, cut me off from Jesus Christ, because I grew up a Christian, and I just knew they didn't have the right to do that. So I left the church, but I never left my beliefs. And I found myself eventually here um, in a Hare Krishna movement, and I don't see any of those kind of attitudes. They embrace all religions, and they, actually we're trying to get them to see a higher taste, but we're not out to convert anybody, you know, and drag them into a temple or something like that. We just offer a higher taste. I always look back on that particular pastor in that particular religion, and actually it kind of terrifies me because we walk around with our beliefs so strong, but yet the slightest uh, difference when we see in other people, uh, ooh, the demons come out. All this spiritual hate and ignorance. Um, I know it's still out there too. And I can't believe that uh, a Christian will antagonize his brother because he's of a different religion.
Hmm.
I'm still living in that kind of world and trying to accept it, and doing my best to make the world a better place, I guess.
Hmm.
That's all.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. It's very, very nice. You see, the 5 days that we spent in that Parliament of the World Religion, you also were exposed to that very politicized sort of fights and differences that were there. And a lot of them were sort of focused in India because it's such a diverse place. So there were groups that of Christians that were very, protesting about the very extreme part of Hinduism that is destroying churches. And then the Hindus are, some Hindu groups were protesting because, they're exaggerating and, all these kinds of differences. So for sure, that is there and is expected in one sense in the common people, the majority, because that's the nature of false ego. The nature of the false ego is that we see a reality, and that reality is the center of the world. So meaning that anything that sort of challenges that reality, we must reject. We see it as threatening. So in one sense, that's a common thing. We find that in Krishna consciousness too. We find that in our community of devotees, there is this, symptoms of biases and all these different things. We find that. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur described us as symptoms of neophytes. Neophytes only see God, the deities, and don't see the devotees. So we see ourselves and the deities and our reality, but we don't see others. So that type of symptoms are there, and it's not unexpected. It's not unexpected. The part that are difficult is those who are in leadership. In this case, you said, your pastor. We look up our leaders, our spiritual leaders, to help us navigate this, the influence of our false ego and our condition, and make us do the choices that are more, that are spiritually sound. But when those leaders are as conditioned as those who are leading, then the whole thing is chaotic. So then you have communities, religious communities, that are being misled in one sense, cheated. And we also find that in our Krishna conscious communities. When sometimes we find ourselves trust in the position of leadership, and we made ourselves being also still influenced by all kinds of material biases. And then, we create more obstacles for others rather than to, and we're losing. You see how many people we're losing just because of that. So it's not an easy thing. Therefore, it's so important that our leaders sort of elevate their capacity. We cannot afford as leaders to be influenced and to make choices driven by our uh, material conceptions and biases. Otherwise, this example that you put of yourself, your experience, We do that to our devotees too. We all experience that throughout our time in Krishna consciousness. That sometimes we find ourselves being pushed out because we're different. So it's something that we have to deal with. It's something that we have to see that is not on that is expected, but we have to demand and ask more from our leaders. And we have to also not only demand, but if we're going to point a finger, we have to also elevate ourselves. Prabhupada says, if you're not able to give a better solution, you better be quiet. So respectfully you can ask, but to beat your chest and then start to criticize and point out, that's not the path either. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about this thing. It's a very important subject matter for us to understand. It's that principles of understanding these two things, vidya and avidya, that these great personalities always highlight. I think it's a little late, so I'm going to stop here. We continue discussing this in our Bhagavatam classes. Thank you. Garantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.